What's going on, guys? I'm Tyler, and I'm here to let you know that Waves is no perfect movie. And it follows the before, during, and aftermath of a tragedy that affects an entire family living in Florida. Their son, Kelvin Harrison Jr., their father, Sterling K. Brown, their mother, Renée Elise Goldsberry, and their daughter, Taylor Russell. I did not see a trailer. I knew nothing about this movie going in because I went into this director's last movie, It Comes at Night, under the exact same circumstances, and I wanted to see what else Trey Edward Shults had to offer. And I've got to say, dude's completely outdone himself. This movie features such beautiful, gorgeous, sweeping cinematography that makes even the most mundane situations look big and cinematic. Each type of shot can have multiple meanings. For example, close-ups. If there are two characters in a close-up, you feel intimacy between the two of them. If there's a close-up of just one character, you feel very isolated. And he's also really good at using long, wide shots in order to focus on one character and the family tension that they're experiencing. And then, once they're done explaining how they feel about a certain person, the camera will pan over to other characters to show their reactions and to make us feel like we can't predict what's going to happen next. And little moments like that add a lot of energy to this movie. And what I loved most about it was it relied so much on visual storytelling. Schultz knows when a character needs to talk in order to express themselves, and when they do, the dialogue does feel grounded and realistic, but he's also good at using not just the camera to tell the story, but colors. Colors of a character's clothes, colors of a location that make you understand what a character is feeling at that moment. There's a lot of blue and red symbolism throughout the movie. And not only that, just the actors silently acting or reacting to a given scene. And that leads to the performances. So many of these actors give career best performances in this movie. Kelvin Harrison Jr. surprised me so much because this is probably the darkest character he's ever played. Because at first, you think he's had a pretty good life. Varsity athlete, loving girlfriend, friends who really appreciate him at school. But then you see his home life and you understand that there's a lot of pressure on him to be the best at whatever he does. And while he does fight back at that pressure whenever he can, you can still sense in his eyes that it bothers him a lot. So whenever there are multiple strokes of bad luck that happen throughout this movie that could threaten that, you don't condone his choices, but you understand why he goes down such a self-destructive path and makes a lot of choices that not just affect him, but affect the other people in his life, maybe even more so than him. Sterling K. Brown is also fantastic as the father, the one who applies the most pressure to his son, not to be a dick, not to be abusive, but in order to make sure his son doesn't take life for granted and instead chooses every opportunity he can for a better future. And while there are many mistakes in this movie that fall on the son's part, it's really easy to go back to the father and blame him for it because he's drilled this mentality into his son that there are no mistakes that can happen, and no matter how small they are, if you make them, you're a complete fuck-up. But the biggest surprise out of the cast for me was Taylor Russell as the daughter, because at the very beginning, she feels like a background character who just silently observes many key moments throughout the movie. And when she almost abruptly becomes integral to the movie, and we'll get to that later, at first it's a little bit jarring, but as soon as she starts to become more relevant to the story and she begins to open up about herself, it becomes even more unpredictable than it was before because she says and does things that her other family members don't, and she feels like a completely fresh character even though we've seen her like little bits here and there beforehand. Now, why do I say she almost abruptly becomes an integral character? Well, usually whenever a movie covers a family tragedy, it usually doesn't show the tragedy at all in order to make it more mysterious and have characters open up about themselves over the course of the movie, or it'll go back and forth from the present day or the past in flashbacks to make you, like, second guess yourself about what these characters are like. This movie does something that, as far as I know, I've never seen been done before. The before and during the tragedy, the part that in most movies would be flashbacks or would just be ignored at all, are the first half of this entire movie. And the second half is the aftermath, the part where we would expect an entire movie to be about. And at first, yeah, I thought it was pretty jarring because you feel like at one certain point the movie's going to end and it's going to leave the characters' fates completely ambiguous, whether they're going to learn from their mistakes or not. But as I kept watching, kept keeping my patience to see what would happen next, that's when it hit me that the second half is usually where most movies would start off. And because we already know what these characters are going through, we're already rooting for them to succeed at overcoming any grief and guilt that they have. And whether or not these characters learn anything in the end, it's resolved in a much faster approach because of the visual storytelling, but it has just as much thematic complexity because we've pretty much examined everything that can be examined about the tragedy. What happens before, the motivations that led to it occurring in the first place, and the reasons any characters would feel guilty or remorseful about themselves. I'd like to talk more about Waves, but the more I do, the more I'm probably going to give things away, so I'm just going to say that Waves is quite possibly, maybe even in my top 5 already, and I've only seen it once. The performances are all top-notch. The direction is beautiful. It is visually told. Trey Edward Shults is a director that I will constantly be watching in the future. He might be one of my favorite directors working today, and the themes feel so universal. The themes of grief, guilt, the motivations that come from making such self-destructive choices and whether or not you can redeem yourself for those actions. All of those things led me to such an emotional experience watching this movie and second-guessing myself because I went into this completely blind. I should really do this more often. And for all those reasons, I'm going to give Waves a 4.5 out of 5. Guys, thanks as always for watching. If you've seen Waves, be sure to let me know in the comments below what you thought of it. And be sure to like, subscribe, and check out my other reviews at NoPerfectMovie.com. Take care.